What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media, bringing you Ravens content every single day. If you want to see that day of the Ravens content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, hit the notification bell as well if you want to get notified every single time I'll put a brand new video. Now, in this video today, I'm talking about none other than the offensive coordinator position. And don't worry, Joshua and I will get back to doing the weekly live streams and stuff like that, and podcasts answering people's questions. I just wanted to address the base topics before we get kind of deep diving into all of those. So stay tuned. We will be returning. It's also tough when, NFL playoffs are going on because, we're still trying to figure out the draft order and we're still trying to figure out other things about that. But don't worry, coming back. Stay tuned for that. But let's get into it. Let's talk about the offensive coordinator position because I fully believe the Baltimore Ravens, when they get their next guy, it needs to be a guy that's young. And that's no disrespect to some of the options out there. There were good options there are still good options at the offensive coordinator position that are veterans. Guys that have coached in the NFL, guys that have been head coaches, guys that have just been OCs for a long time. They're out there, right? Eric Bieniemy. You can look at Frank Reich, who, shout out to him, he just got hired as the Carolina Panthers head coach. I don't think the Ravens should go after somebody that is older. And the reason for that is because the NFL is changing. The NFL is adapting. Football always advances from the lowest form up to the top rather than the other way around. Why is that? Because players develop in certain ways based on high school schemes, then based on college schemes, and then they get to the NFL. And we see it all the time. Things become part of the NFL. RPOs, that came from high school. Then it got to the college level, took over college, and then it took over the NFL back in 2019, I believe it was, when the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl. They kind of were the first team that were just hammering with that RPO, and it just kind of took over. So when you get these older coaches, we see teams like the New England Patriots coached by Bill Belichick. Again, Bill's a great coach, but he is not adapting to the modern NFL, but he's still so good. He's adapting, but he's not bringing in coordinators that are trying to bring in and change anything. He has a system. He is sticking with that system. And you look at all of the successful coaches, or many of the successful coaches in the NFL right now, those are all very young guys, that are kind of taking over outside of the legends, right? The legendary coaches that we have that are, future Hall of Famers, right? Guys like Bill Belichick, guys like Andy Reid. Those are probably the only two. Oh, and Mike Tomlin, I think, would be the three locks for the Hall of Fame currently coaching in the NFL. There may be somebody else that isn't coming to me on the top of my head. There's borderline guys, Harbaugh, McCarthy, stuff like that. But overall, the successful teams in the NFL over the last couple of seasons, they're all coming from these new age, kind of offenses because the player pool is different. The player pool is drastically different. The position of quarterback is changing. The position of wide receiver is changing. The position of offensive tackle, the position of offensive line, tight end, it's all changing drastically. If you look at the NFL 15 years ago and compare it to today, it's a very different product. Offenses are played very differently. Why? Because there's new penalties, and offensive line play has gotten significantly worse. And that's because partially because people don't want to play offensive line, more rules. And so the NFL has become a quick pass league rather than, sit back, drop back, wait, and throw. It is quick pass, quick pass, quick pass, quick pass. And that's how teams are able to move the ball. So the wide receivers are, having to run different routes. And there's a lot more pre-snap motion than there used to be. And I'm not saying it's better than what it was back then. I prefer watching older football. However, it's different. And so when you have something that's different, you want to find somebody that can become a trendsetter. And when you're trying to find a trendsetter, it's very difficult to find one that's in the later end of their career or towards the back end. That's why I love the Mike Macdonald signing to be the defensive coordinator, because Mike Macdonald was a young defensive mind that was like, hey, maybe this guy can come in and change something. And he came in and revolutionized the Ravens defense. It played very differently from it had in past, and it was better than it had been in past and solved many of the major issues that they had previously. That's why I love that hiring. And I think John Harbaugh needs to look at offensive coordinator and look at a young guy. Young guy doesn't mean no experience. Young guy means not somebody that's 65 years old. So a young guy could be a guy like Zach Robinson, right? With the LA Rams, where it's like, okay, he's been in the league for 5 years. He's about like 35 or 38 years old. I'm looking for somebody under the age of like 45. Okay. And again, I'm not going to be pissed if the Ravens get an offensive coordinator that's 55 or 60 or 75, right? I'm not going to be upset, but I believe strategically, if they want to advance more, they need to go after somebody that is trying to do something new, because Lamar Jackson is such a unique talent that you can try something like that, right? I think it's very similar, and I don't want to compare it to this because they never won a championship, but very similar to basketball with the Houston Rockets, right? James Harden with them still is, but was so unique in his ability to score the ball in isolation that they created a new system. Or not a new system, but they brought in a coach that would try and revolutionize how people play basketball. And they brought in Mike D'Antoni, and they really worked on his, he previously had the 7 seconds or left with Steve Nash, but they brought that in and he changed it up a little bit to give it like, okay, hey, we're going to try something. And it was, here's your star player. Here's shooters everywhere. Let's just go, ISO, hit shooters, have them knock down threes. Like, that's what it was. And they were able to dominate. They went toe-to-toe. They went 7 games with, the Kevin Durant Golden State Warriors, which, some people would argue is the greatest, most difficult to defeat team in NBA history. And they went 7 games with them, right? Revolutionizing and evolving and bringing in new ideas happens every day. And we see so many times that the teams that bring in those new ideas, they're able to have the most success, right? Look at the Eagles in the RPO, right? Look at the Shanahan system. How long did it take for the Shanahan system to win a Super Bowl with the new era? 4 years, maybe less, because Kyle Shanahan became the coach in like 2019, or 20, maybe it was 2018, and his tree was able to win a Super Bowl with Sean McVay. And now the Shanahan system isn't created by Kyle Shanahan. That was Mike Shanahan, but Kyle Shanahan developed it and he changed it, and he was able to add a lot more things and build off of something. Again, I'm not trying to rewrite the wheel, but if somebody could come in and say, hey, you know what? We can use Lamar in the RPO. Or, hey, we can use Lamar and we can run a heavy option offense, but RPO options. Let's run RPOs. Let's do it. Let's just run RPOs and hit guys quickly. Hit Mark Andrews quickly. Hit Rashad Bateman quickly. Let's do that. Or maybe it's, I don't, a lot of people are like, oh man, it would be cool to bring in, Kubiak or whatever. Like we did with Gary Kubiak. But it's like, okay, offenses are so different from what they were back then. I think we need to find somebody that's younger or somebody coming from college that, is able to experiment. We have Lamar Jackson. Experimentation is necessary if you want to find the best possible offense. That was one of the biggest problems with Greg Roman, was he never experimented. It was, here's what we're doing. We're going to do this for 3 straight years, and it's going to get progressively worse every single year. That's been Greg Roman's entire career. Get somewhere. Oh, wow, look, it's working. No experimentation, no changes, nothing, and it just falls off a cliff. You can look at the efficiency metrics for Kaepernick. You can look at them for Lamar. They're almost exactly the same. Those offenses could not score first year and then drop. It's exactly what they all did. Greg Roman didn't change anything. He didn't experiment. Bring in a coach that's going to experiment. And I'm going to list off a couple of names. Not going to say that these are the best candidates, right? But Kellen Moore would experiment. He's in negotiation for head coaching meetings again. I don't think the Ravens would hire him, but he would be somebody that would experiment. You can look at a guy like Garrett Riley. Garrett Riley, the younger brother of Lincoln Riley, is the offensive coordinator over at TCU. He would be willing to experiment. He would be willing to try and make changes, right? I don't think going after a veteran, like, an old college coach would work. But I think going after anybody that is going to try and do something different, I think I fully welcome that. And that's what I want the Ravens to do. I want them to look at this team and say, hey, Lamar, this is what we're going to try and do. No one else is going to try this. Let's see what we can do. And if it doesn't work one year, you can change and you find a new strategy. And that's what these guys coming into the meetings, they'll say, hey, this is my plan. And I'm going to make up a plan on the spot. We are going to roll Lamar Jackson out of the pocket, utilize his legs on the run, not have him be a runner, but have him roll out to utilize that threat and have him throw down the field a lot. Kind of similar to McVay and what he was doing with Stafford with a bad offensive line. Roll him out of the pocket, hit players. Look at what LaFleur does with Rodgers. Roll him out of the pocket so we can use that arm. But the threat of Lamar legs is so good. Let's roll him out, have that threat, and we're going to have a lot of deep shots. If that doesn't work and we're not getting it, what we can try and do is we can try and start having option routes with the wide receivers a little bit more, have more instinctual football, have Lamar and the receivers get on the same page so then they know, hey, I'm going to cut at this point. That's what you already do with Mark Andrews. Let's try and develop that. That's what Ohio State does with their wide receivers. I'm not saying this would work. I'm not saying I'm not an offensive coordinator. I'm not going to analyze and say, oh man, the Ohio State offense would work really well. I don't think it would. But again, I think experimentation is the best way to go about it, because you have such a unique talent and a unique asset in Lamar Jackson that it almost hurts them if they don't try things. If they bring someone in and he tries to run the same offense. That's why I think the Chiefs and Andy Reid have been so good, is Andy Reid's always been willing to experiment. Like that's why. Like Andy Reid's always just like, oh yeah, let's try this out. And every year you see like new things and you're like, what the heck are they doing? And it works. They started the underhand, shuttle pass to the tight end or the fullback or whoever's motioning at the goal line. They started doing that. And it was like, yo, this works. And everybody's running it now. Right? Because they were experimenting with that. The Eagles experimented with the quarterback push on the QB sneak. And now everybody's like, oh, wait, you can push the quarterback. Motion a tight end behind the quarterback and just basically throw him into the end zone. Experimentation is necessary, and I think young coordinators are typically more likely to be the experimenters. And if one works out really well, replace Harbaugh. Like they could. I think that's the biggest thing. This is a great offense with great weapons that any coordinator would be able to look at it and be like, okay, we have a really interesting wide receiver one, great tight end, generational quarterback, very good running backs, and a great offensive line. Who wouldn't want to try things out? Let me know in the comment section down below your guys' thoughts on any coordinator options, but this was kind of more broad and just like, hey, go for somebody that's going to experiment. Just like my thoughts on the search for offensive coordinator, find somebody unique, somebody different. We don't want the same thing that everybody else is doing. Find someone that's going to shake things up, because Lamar Jackson can shake things up. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for daily Ravens content, and I'll see all of you again tomorrow.